In the history books, some moments stand out as clear reminders of how much harm humans can do, but also how much strength and determination they can show in tough times. One such moment happened after World War II, a war that had already caused an unbelievable amount of suffering. The war was almost over, and the Allied forces were getting closer to Japan. It was during this difficult period that something happened that changed history forever: the atomic bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. This happened on August 6, 1945, when a B-29 bomber called the Enola Gay, flown by Colonel Paul Tibbets, took off from the Pacific island of Tinian. On board, it had a weapon that was more destructive than anything the world had ever seen: an atomic bomb nicknamed Little Boy. The target was Hiroshima, a city in Japan with both historical importance and military significance. Welcome back once again to Docutainment's videos. As the Enola Gay flew through the sky, the crew knew they were about to use a weapon unlike any other. This bomb was created as part of a secret project called the Manhattan Project, driven by the fear that Nazi Germany might build such a weapon first. A successful test of an atomic bomb had taken place in the New Mexico desert just a few weeks earlier, proving how devastating it could be. At exactly 8:15 am, the bomb was dropped over Hiroshima. It fell from the sky, and as it descended, it created a blinding flash of light that burned everything below. In just moments, a huge explosion happened, followed by a massive mushroom-shaped cloud rising high into the sky. Hiroshima was hit by an atomic explosion. The destruction was terrible. Buildings were turned into piles of rubble, and the people in the city, men, women, and children, were burned to ashes in an instant. The explosion created a powerful shockwave that flattened everything around. Fires broke out, adding to the destruction. Hiroshima, which had once been a lively city, had turned into a place of unimaginable horror. After the bombing, a strange silence settled over the city. Those who survived the initial explosion now had to deal with the terrible aftermath. The streets were filled with wounded and dying people, all crying out for help. Hospitals were overwhelmed by the large number of injured, struggling to provide care. The scale of this disaster was almost impossible to comprehend. The full extent of the human suffering only became clear in the days and weeks that followed. It's estimated that at least 70,000 people died immediately in the explosion. However, the horror didn't end there. About 70,000 more people would die from radiation exposure in the months and years that followed. It's believed that the total death toll over 5 years might have reached or even surpassed 200,000 as people developed cancer and other long-term health problems due to the radiation. But amid all this destruction and despair, stories of hope and strength began to emerge. Survivors, despite their own injuries and trauma, found the courage to help each other. They comforted the wounded, shared their meager food and water, and provided support to those who had lost everything. Even in the darkest times, the human spirit's capacity for compassion excelled through. As the world grappled with the aftermath of Hiroshima, the United States remained determined to end the war. 3 days after the Hiroshima bombing, on August 9, 1945, another atomic bomb, called Fat Man, was dropped on Nagasaki. The devastation in Nagasaki was just as terrible, with tens of thousands losing their lives. These bombings pushed Japan to the brink of surrender. On August 14, 1945, Japan agreed to surrender unconditionally, marking the end of World War II. The world had seen the terrible power of atomic weapons, and a horrific chapter in history had come to an end. In the years that followed, the bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki became subjects of intense debate and reflection. Critics argued that using such weapons was unnecessary and morally wrong. Some believed that Japan was already close to surrender, and the bombings were more about showing the United States' atomic strength to the Soviet Union. Former President Dwight D. Eisenhower, in his 1963 memoir, criticized the bombings, saying they weren't needed to force Japan to surrender. He believed they caused immense suffering for little gain. However, supporters of the bombings pointed out the context of the time. The war had been long and brutal, and Japan had shown no signs of surrendering without conditions. Invading Japan was a grim prospect that could have resulted in even more casualties on both sides. Supporters argued that the atomic bombs were a way to end the war quickly and avoid a costly invasion. In the years that followed, survivors of Hiroshima and Nagasaki, known as Hibakusha, became tireless advocates for peace and disarmament. They shared their painful stories with the world, emphasizing the need to prevent such devastation from happening again. Their voices, born from the depths of tragedy, carried a simple yet powerful message: never again. As decades passed, the world continued to grapple with the moral and ethical questions raised by the atomic bombings. These events left a deep mark on the collective memory of humanity, serving as a stark reminder of the incredible destructive power humans had unleashed upon themselves. The horrors of those days continued to shape discussions on nuclear disarmament and the pursuit of a world without nuclear weapons. In May 2016, more than 70 years after the bombings, President Barack Obama became the first sitting U.S. president to visit Hiroshima. He stood in the Peace Memorial Park, offered condolences to the victims, and called for a world without nuclear weapons. His visit symbolized the recognition of the enduring impact of those fateful days in 1945 and a commitment to preventing such horrors from happening again. Today, Hiroshima and Nagasaki stand as symbols of resilience and peace. They remind us of the terrible consequences of war and the importance of diplomacy and dialogue in resolving conflicts. The Hiroshima Peace Memorial, also known as the A-Bomb Dome, serves as a powerful symbol of the enduring hope for world peace and the ultimate elimination of all nuclear weapons. The bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki remain a complex and debated part of history. They evoke a range of emotions, from sadness and horror to discussions and reflection. As we think about the events of that August in 1945, we are reminded that history is shaped by the choices we make, and the lessons from the past must guide us toward a future where the fear of nuclear destruction is a distant memory. I hope you like it and share this video of Docutainment. Thank you so much for your kind comments. See you in the next awesome video.